show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Greetings, Hotep, Hotep, and Aquaba. Welcome yet again to another live broadcast of AST Speaks, building a new legacy here with the Crew Podcast. Again, this is your host, Queen Mother, Dr. Chinsera. And we're going to have a wonderful conversation this evening where we highlight a number of things that are linked to today, for example, the opening of the vernal equinox, the beginning of spring, where things are livening themselves. We're focusing on being fulfilled, uplifted, healed beyond words and beyond measure, right? And this is a great opportunity for us to look into the other section, the other version of how we bring truth as power, not just truth to power, but truth as power. So you'll hear us speaking of truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, harmony, all of those values, all of those virtues, all of those qualities in four letters, Ma'at. Part of what we like to highlight tonight, and I have a very special guest, and I'm looking forward to being able to having that guest really add to some of the information that we're going to highlight this evening. And before we go to that, for those persons that are just getting familiarized with Speaks, what does that really mean? And what does that really connect to? And how does that fit into some of the words that we're presenting here to be able to keep people in a space of full upliftment and engagement and love and building legacy? And what does that really translate into when we talk about building legacy? This is an opportunity for persons to be a part of an interdisciplinary, transcultural type of media, communicative broadcast, podcasts, all of these casts, yeah, to be able to share conversations. What does she mean by conversations? Life force, life propelled, life giving, life centered conversations. And we choose to remove the con and put in the unk. So it's conversations for us to just really beginning to give uplifting, life centered discussions in a variety of areas. We talk about the action. You'll hear me speak of that framework of actionable deliverables to the best of our ability so that we can actually keep some things moving in a accord that is very positive, very loving, but also very direct, very focused, very grounded. And then we also speak of our perspectives on global affairs, whether it's movements in the Caribbean space, whether we make references to the 48 contiguous US or the wider Americas, because we know that when we say America, or we speak of the Americas, we're speaking from the North Pole to the South Pole, and not only the 48 contiguous, and not only Canada, and not only the Caribbean, and not only Central America and South America. We're speaking of the totality on this side of the Atlantic, wrapping all the way over to the Pacific and moving forward. Yes? So that's part of why we have these global conversations to be able to speak around a variety of issues. With that being said, there's a lot that's happening in the world right now. And so, what we desire to do here at Speaks, be part of the crew podcast with the vibration of sisters as well as brothers that are bringing this fusion, this synergy, this loving, informative engagement so that when we begin to speak, when we begin to teach, when we begin to take action, when we begin to learn, that we're able to speak about things that are away from the distractions that are the common theme that we might want to turn our back on. Be mindful of what's happening, but let it do with chaos and anarchy and mismanagement and anti-humanism and chaos on that side. So that's the other reason why when we're going to speak and share tonight, we're going to have an opportunity to bring some words of strength, some clarity of engagement on how we begin to speak to one another, with one another, etc. So with that, I'd like to introduce one of my illustrious, wise, seasoned, experiential beyond measure, regal, revolutionary, powerful, and empowering African Queen Mother warriors to the platform with me, and that is none other than African Queen Mother warrior Isis, Basu Isis asked to be exact. Greetings, African Queen Mother warrior.
Greetings, greetings. I'm so honored to share this space with you, most glorious, wonderful, wise, passionate, powerful, and empowering African Queen Mother Warrior, Senator Dr. Chinzera. It's indeed an honor.
It's an honor that we share for sure, and we know that we keep getting to our in the same space. Next time we're going to just do the fusion and really be able to just embrace and do some other work. So thank you so much for tuning in, joining the Crew podcast, because this is an opportunity. As you can see, it's a number of sisters that bring together a variety of truth experiences, lived experiences, and perspectives that really allow for us to talk about things. So for those that do not know this powerful sister that is sharing the platform with me this evening, I just would like to share a very concise view. African Queen Mother Warrior Isis Basu, Isis asked, and I'll let her speak to the Basu title a little later, stands first and foremost as an African Queen Mother Warrior born in Trinidad and Tobago of the Yoruba Nation, a committed activist with 50 plus years at the forefront of fighting systemic racial justice and challenging structural racism, including as a grassroots anti apartheid activist during the 80s. She has over 25 years of leadership experience in the nonprofit sector, holding various senior roles, contributing to numerous networks, and a multifaceted advocate, community organizer, project manager, and a dedicated, livicated participatory solutions practitioner, using this ethos to underpin her work as a coach, facilitator, and trainer. She is a skillful public speaker. African Queen Mother Warrior Isis is passionate about language as a transformative tool and its power to shape narrative. She is a poet, a radio presenter, and a DJ. That's another conversation because all of us to hold DJ selection on every
Mhm.
section. Okay, we'll come back to that. African Queen Mother Warrior Isis plays with words, experimenting and disregarding rules. Language is the prize of the victim, the tool of the oppressor. She describes herself as an eclectic, African centric poet. I want to say that one more time for the people, persons in the back. An eclectic, African centric poet. Her poetry encapsulates her commitment to anti colonialist, anti racist, anti imperialist struggle, identity, culture, and her story. Hence, she uses poetry as advocacy. Lafia Hetep P. Sanku Justineb and I present so that you have some context of who we're having this conversation with. African Queen Mother Warrior Basu Isis As. Oh
A tap, tap, a tap.
yay! I tell you, because you know we could do this thing all day, and we go this way and so, and this way. And so we're very grateful. And I would like to give a special shout out to our visionary, like no other of the crew podcast, Queen Angela, who is making sure things are happening in the background in the way that it needs to happen in the background so that we can be in the forefront sharing this information. And I'd like for you to, I've said a lot in just introducing DI, and I would love for you to, share with persons, some of your, some of your visions. What are the highlights of some of the work? And definitely tell persons about some of your DJing and your regular radio broadcast so that way persons can also tune into that.
Yeah, well, give thanks, as I said. I'm first and foremost an African woman. I was born in Trinidad Tobago, and I was taken without my consent by my mother to England at the age of 11. I was not very happy about that. Nonetheless, I managed to navigate uh, Babylon, Babylon system. There was a lot of challenges coming to this place. It's not for the faint-hearted amongst us, I have to say. It's a bit of a baptism of fire, but I basically grew up and was shaped in London, in West London, and went on to carve out a space for myself, becoming an activist. Initially, just sort of like, like 16 and 15, sort of that age, going on anti-war marches and various things, eventually ending up on a picket outside the racist South African embassy, as we called it back in the 80s, uh, advocating for the release of Nelson Mandela and all the political prisoners, eventually moving through that work into Pan Africanism because of my close relationship that I built with the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania. And from there, really, that was the jumping off point for my activism. And I suppose I've been involved in various forms of activism ever since. Been involved in many campaigns, a lot of anti-racist work. I was a black and anti-racist officer for a while, also legal work. I did briefly want to become a barrister and embarked on a law degree in my kind of early 20s, but then other things got in the way. I met my ex-husband, got married, had my first child and my second child, came to view law as not something I really wanted to be a part of.
Hmm.
Moved on to advocacy because of my legal experience, advocating for looked after children, as we call them, children in the care system. I did that work for a long time, went on to run charities, running at, for advocacy for disabled people, for people with mental health living in the community and in psychiatric or mental health units. I've worked on mental health wards. I've worked in drug and alcohol misuse and use. I've done the rounds, really.
Right.
I've worked in many fields, and then my expressive side in my poetry sort of came, I suppose, as I was quite old really to come to. I was already in my 40s when I really started to write poetry. I've always loved music. Music has always been at the core of my heart. I mean, I come from a musical island. We grew up with music as a big part of us, with our steel pan and calypso, and obviously in London with the big Jamaican community. A lot of our people are African heritage or Jamaican, so the reggae, the sound systems, the dance hall, all of that, and of course, the influence of America, soul, blues, hip hop. Of course, I remember being in Queens in the early 80s as a teenager when hearing the double Dutch bus and Africa Bambata and all that stuff. So music has always been a part of me, words, poetry, and I've gone on now to host a couple of radio programs. I do a couple of programs a week on a Friday and a Saturday, and I write and perform poetry, and I DJ at events. So yeah, that's I'm a mother. I have two daughters in their 30s, and one about to be 30 this year, one in her early 30s, and that's who I am, really.
Yeah, well, we're grateful. We're grateful for even the way in which you present that because this goes to some of the conversations that we were having a little earlier and just putting in the context, how do we build legacy? What are the ways that our sistren alongside our brethren, and when I say this, I'm speaking of those that are willing to be in Ma'at. So for those that just came, Ma'at, this is lesson 2: truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. That's the concise element. We could sit here and have discussions on this for eons, but our focus is to at least look at those seven virtue value principles, right? To be able to ground how we speak to each other, how we work together, how we invest and trust and respect and sustain integrity and utilize ethics to ground all of the different things that we do. Yes. And with that being said, there's a lot going on right now. I mean, every time, inside of, you look inside of WhatsApp, for those of us that are doing any kind of activity outside of our regular day work, this is a time where, like here for example in the Virgin Islands, the month of March, while we're highlighting the International Women's Month observances that are happening literally globally, and there's a lot of activities that have taken place from the beginning of March all the way to the end of March. There's activities happening in the United Nations specific to their Commission on the Status of Women, and all the different agencies and organizations and entities that are speaking of the truth as power for women, right? And how that balances with our families, with our children, with our men in society and work. Where do we place our sisters in some of these conversations? I've spoken with a number of sisters who are actually in New York during this particular time, and I found it very interesting that some of the themes for International Women's Month have been grounded or linked to, I should say, a variety of initiatives around the awareness of the importance of the protections, the security, and the equity that is beyond deserving of our women folk. So I thought it was really powerful to know that, in addition to that International Women's Day piece that happens every March 8th and is more connected to labor, that there are these discussions around International Women's Month. And it's particularly through the lens of, I'm going to use the lens of the United Nations, primarily because that's who most people listen to in many respects, or that's the entity that has the wider visibility. While we know at the end of the day that our women folk are the visibility. We are the source of that energy, and we are the source of that engagement. So I think it's really powerful for us to like look back and explore, what does it mean to be part of the international affairs that are linked to not just Women's Day, but just the observance of international women's initiatives. Because this year, part of the initiative through the United Nations Women's Entity was exactly that: rights, equality, empowerment were some of their key themes. And we can all speak to the fact that women around the world are still in an active quest for, quote, equal rights, quote, equal opportunities, and definitely, quote, equal power, right? What are some of your reflections on that, African Queen Mother Warrior, Isis?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you
I'm
well.
so sorry. My phone it just died. It like overheated. This that really happens. I don't know what's going on.
It's
Cosmic forces are not aligning at the moment.
okay.
Yes.
No,
So um yeah, I just wanted to comment actually on the principles of Mahat before we talk about. I mean, Mahat is the bringer of the very principle of what people call justice and
mhm,
law. These precepts. And for me, this concept, the Mahatian principle, is very important. You mentioned my title, Basu. I gained this title last year in Jamaica when I was initiated into Basuship through training to become basically an instructor in the Kemetic yoga system, Tef Sima Paut Netaru, moving in union and company of goddesses and gods, as it translates. And as part of that process, we embarked on a 42-day Mahatic fast starting on the 1st of January. So I did that for 42 days, during which we focused on the 42 precepts of Mahat. So, again, the focus of the woman in African spirituality is very, very important. And it's, excuse me, it's only fitting that we're now in March focusing on International Women's Month, Women's History Month, it's also called, and centering the woman, because we come from a society of matriarchs. We come from a society that before, certainly before the advent of colonialism and the invasion of the Europeans and the bringers of Eurocentric ideas and practices, we valued and placed our women in high regard. And so part of us, or for part of what we as Africans must be focusing on during these months, but not just, of course, 1 month. I mean, 51, I keep saying 51% of the population of the world are women, but focusing on is reclamation, reclaiming that which we had, reinstituting our matriarchal societies, recentering our women, our African women, our queens, our goddesses, our empresses back into the position that we once were in, valuing us, our contributions, and it's really important because I remember one of the African Queen Mother Risings sessions podcasts that were done, talking about how we as African women who follow these principles, these spiritual principles, when we talk about centering women, when we talk about ensuring women are empowered and enabled, and that women have a voice and are seen and heard, and that women are valued, we're not in any way denigrating our brothers. We are not feminist. We don't believe in none of that white woman foolishness. We are actually womanist. We are African womanist. We love our African men, our African brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our fathers, our sons, and we are simply reclaiming balance, a sa and a set. We're simply balancing the male and female principle. We're also not asking for equality, because there's no such thing as equality. Again, this is another Setian principle. This is another trick of I spoke about language. There's a whole thing about doublespeak. Those of you who know about George Orwell, the man was a prophet, a European prophet, because all that he said about doublespeak came to pass. We're not looking for equality for women. Women and men are not equal. We're not the same. We're looking for equity, which is very different. Equity in a system, in an inequitable system. Equality is can never happen between a man and a woman, because a woman is not a man and a man is not a woman. But we are no lesser. We are different, and we complement each other. So for me, when I take part in International Women Month events and I celebrate our queens, our goddesses, our empresses, for me, I'm looking to reclaim our position. I'm looking to bring back those African principles. I'm initiated into this Kemetic system, but I'm also a Voodoo practitioner. I'm initiated into a temple, or more than one actually, but primarily one in the Republic of Benin. So it's about reclaiming African philosophy, African cosmology, African principles for liberty.
Right. And this is the part that I am grateful. Thank you so much for providing context and how we begin to shape and share some of these different perspectives, because when we speak of International Women's Month, many persons tend to take that as that we're being very exclusive and not including our children that are male and female, our partners that are supportive of what we do, and also protective of giving us that breadth and depth of space so that we can do this work and do this work well, right? And it's also not to be in competition with our sisters. That's something else that we have been marginalizing in some of our engagements, to the point that some sisters, it becomes complexion, hairstyle, class, how much money you think you have, realizing that you might be rich, but you surely aren't wealthy. So there's a whole lot of other elements that come in that. Where you from? You born there, yeah? You born over saw? Are you from the not, the so, whatever? Forgetting that at the end of the day, if we peel off all of this, we're gonna still bleed, and we need to navigate how to be around one another, principally with harmony and unity, as we have both shared, grounded in Ma'at. And that's something that we desire to speak to. And so I want to thank you for just giving the context and giving some breadth of space so persons recognize that one of the things that tends to happen amongst our sistren is we allow distractions, male and female,
Uh-huh.
and distractions, religion or not, religion and spirituality, class, how much money you have or how much money you make, what kind of job you have, and forget that it could be the sister that is the housekeeper that makes only $10 US an hour. But if she's principled and grounded and engaged, that's the sister that we're supposed to make sure that we uplift and uphold. What
Know
she's
thyself.
know thyself. And see, we start to say Harek Jasek, Tepi Nefer. So when we're saying Harek Jasek, Tepi Nefer, we're just saying in an ancestral African language, the Meta Nature, know yourself for the greatest and highest good. When we say Seneb Jasek, Tepi Nefer, we're simply saying heal yourself for the greatest and highest good. Those are the things that are facilitated amongst womenists. Let me be more specific, amongst ancestral, ancient African, Nubian, Kushanu, Kemetu heritage legacy womenists. See, I want to make sure I cover like a little bit of everybody, all right? Because sometimes we may say Kemet, and then people immediately and definitely the other side forbid if we just say Egypt because people like, ugh. And we have to explain to persons that those terms are designed to turn us away from a very ancestral, sacred tradition, a very ancestral, sacred tradition. Hence, when we speak of Ah Speaks, we're also incorporating that element of those ancestral, sacred traditions that facilitate all the building blocks of society, nation building that we're engaged in. And not to say that we have it in perfection, because if we had it in perfection, this would be a much shorter podcast and we would already be.
You wouldn't even need these podcasts. we'd be we'd be where we are. So yes, we need this work because because of the work we need to do.
So I want to make sure that I give another special shout out to some of the other divas that have come into the platform as well and are just tuning in, listening, engaging, and offering their support. Sister Queen, Shanette Johnson, whoop, whoop. And of course, we have our visionary like no other, Sister Queen Angela Smith Tom. And I'm always navigating because there's some congratulatory messages. We're gonna get to that because she's got like Earth Strong birthday, solar anniversary celebrations coming up next month. She's getting ready to do like yet another academic credential on the graduate level. So I'll come to that and highlight that a little later, as well as I'd like to send a shout out to Sister Queen Patrice Grimble. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us, as well as Sister Queen Cheryl Northern Legrand. And I highlight those that are again part of the platform and the network that also share this information because these are things that some of these versations we don't always get to have. And so we're doing what I refer to as the public version, but I think you can tell that we speak unapologetically, very clearly, and we always do our best to make sure that truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony are at the center, anchoring our exchanges. So, with that being said, what I
Deo,
do I want to? So I'm like,
Deo.
so another part of our uplifting energy during this time, and for those persons that may not be as familiar, it's like a short piece here. You can go to unwomen.org, And when you go to unwomen.org, it's going to have a host of information of what's been going on around the globe with women's activities, affairs, and so forth. But I wanted to speak to something specific. So this year, 2025, is also where the global community is recognizing the 30th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, where there was an actual adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Now, let's keep this in mind, 30 years. That's like a whole child for some of us ago. And I think it's very important to know that this is also, while it's the 30th anniversary since this Fourth World Conference on Women, this is the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women that is actually happening. They're closing tomorrow. So they've been having various sessions, meetings, as well as alliance gatherings of thousands of women as well as men from around the globe from March 10th, right after International Women's Day on March 8th, and is closing out tomorrow, March 21st, in the United Nations headquarters in New York. And so I just want persons to just be aware there's a lot of content that's coming out of there. There's a lot of statements, a lot of action programs. And I would like to say not just projects that are short term, but actual institutionalized programs that are in place to really address some of the needs of our women and our girls around the globe. And it's important that we make sure that the essence of what our needs, our values, our interests are are always included in these spaces so it doesn't become a solely feminist, very Eurasian type of a agenda or an outcome. And I say that clearly because many times our voices as women of African ancestry are not always included. And if they are, they're through a lens of what is given permission for. And we don't come to ask for permission. Your mother don't ask permission to raise and birth you. How that? Just add some context. So I just wanted to give that as a caveat because this is also leading up to the other part of the conversation that I'm hoping that we can have because while this is happening, then we've been hearing about all of the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. Here in the Caribbean, we've got the CARICOM doing a host of activities around this time and actually getting into like really survival mode with some of the new approaches to governance that are coming out of the 48 contiguous US, specifically through the new executive administration, right? And I choose to give no name because that way they can't accuse me of saying anything. Like, right. We just focus on not the distraction, but how are we moving forward with the resolution that helps us to build us, to ensure that our children, our families, our sisters, our brothers, our communities thrive, not just survive, not just beg for crumbs, but that not what is it? Not be a crumb snatcher, but a crumb creator. How about that? Right? So that way we can actually move into some other discussions. So I thought it was very interesting that also tomorrow, while this is going on in Nueva York, in New York, that in at the University of the West Indies, the with support from the Emancipation Support Committee of your yard, Trinidad and Tobago, along, in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago, the UE is going to be hosting the launch of the United Nations Second International Decade for People of African Descent. So I want to just kind of drop that in there so that we can speak to the what are some of the other elements because their theme is confronting. Oh, she went offline. Oh my. But confronting the legacies of colonialism and enslavement, delivering reparatory justice. And I think it's important that persons just know that these are the types of activities that are happening on a global space, but they're also linked to what is happening that's of specific concern in the Americas. And in this case, bringing it into that global space of what's happening, because there was an international decade for people of African descent from January 2015 until December 2024. And then, in its infinite wisdom, the United Nations launched a second international decade, because most persons didn't really know that there was an international decade for people of African descent that was highlighting recognition. The theme then was recognition, justice, and development. And most persons didn't even know that that was going on from 2015 until the end of last year. So it's really important. And again, this I want to highlight. This is just not when we say African people, Black people, African American. You want to call yourself Negro, colored. If you see yourself as BIPOC, West Indian, all them terms, Afro descendant, all of them terms. We're talking about persons of African. They use the term descent, and there's many of us, because we talk about words, right? We tend to say ascent, or we'll speak of the ancestry. Follow your bloodline. It's going to take you right to the 12 million square miles of an African continent that has been surviving and thriving for millennia upon millennia upon millennia upon millennia upon millennia upon millennia. So while my sister's getting her signal back in order, I just wanted to highlight that this launch of the second international decade that's happening at the UE in Trinidad and Tobago, with the support of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, along with the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, will have as its featured speaker Dr. June Sumer. She is the chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, with her original lineage coming true, St. Lucia. And it will also be this official launch of the decade by the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs of Trinidad and Tobago, by none other than Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown, and he will provide the official launch. And then the guest speaker is His Excellency David Comisiong, who serves as the ambassador of Barbados to the Caribbean community and chair of the Caribbean Pan African Network. And he's hailing True Barbados, of course. And then another guest speaker that's being highlighted for this event tomorrow is Dr. Claudius Fergus, who is the chair of the Trinidad and Tobago National Committee on Reparations. And this is all happening tomorrow at 3 p.m. Atlantic Eastern Standard Time. We're on the same time now. Only in the 48 contiguous is there a change of time. Well, at least for a while. And this is going to be happening in the Daga Auditorium at the University of the West Indies in as I mentioned. So I think that I wanted to just set that standard, because you've done a lot of work around reparations, around persons of African ascent being involved and knowing who they are. You've been, as a priestess, as a keeper of the initiatory practices of making sure that we do not disrespect our ancestors, that we do not disregard our legacy. I would love for you to just share what are some of the highlights that you would like to see in terms of the actionable deliverables around these different pieces, whether it's the UN Commission on Status of Women, the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, CARICOM, CRC. I mean, you're a member of CPAN, the Caribbean Pan African Network, as well. How do we, as an African Queen Mother Warrior, what are some of the highlights you'd like to see in terms of actionable deliverables?
Yes, well, thank you for giving a thorough rundown or summary of some of the things that are happening as we speak, literally, the things that are going on. So, well, we always have this issue, from my perspective, the disconnect between, I suppose, what one might call the higher echelons, these big global organizations like the UN, like governments, and the grassroots. How does this translate into real, tangible actions, tangible, transformative change for women on the ground, ordinary women, the woman in the market, the woman taking her children to school, not the people who are, what would I say, the kind of world leader sort of status. And I think this is one of the issues that we face. So it's really interesting that we have all this, 30th anniversary or 40th, was it 30th anniversary of the Declaration around women. I used to run a lot of training around diversity and equity and human rights. And one of the things I'd often open with when I spoke about gender, when I spoke about women specifically, was that in the UK, in 1970, we had this thing called the Equal Pay Act. And then I'd always turn to the people in the room and say, well, do we have equal pay? And it would be no. So if we do the math, 1970 is a long time ago. That's definitely a whole human being. That's a mother and possibly a grandmother. And yet, equal pay doesn't exist.
Hmm.
So I mentioned law. I found it fascinating that we could have all this legislation, all these principles, all this and that and this and that, but in reality, on the ground, it wasn't. It just was not translating. It was not reaching the people on the ground. And again, when we think about the first international decade, I mean, justice, development, recognition, where was the justice for women? Where was the recognition for women? And what kind of development was supposed to be put in place to ensure that women, particularly those who are most vulnerable, particularly those most in need, particularly those with the least economic stability, where was that justice coming from and for who? And who is supposed to give the justice? So the fact that, like you quite rightly said, we had a whole 10 years and we had to start all over again on the 1st of January 2025 for another 10 years in the hope that as Africans and particularly as women, there will be some justice development. There will be some recognition for us. Okay, so we're giving it another go. I applaud the fact that the CPAN in particular and the Emancipation Support Committee are doing this work. I would like to have had seen a conference happening around women that centered only women's voices, to be honest.
Okay.
The fact we are in 2025 and that a conference for women, we still have so many male voices. There's so much male space, or so much space being taken up by men, and there's nothing wrong with the men being there. I mean, we should every conference on women, unless we're talking about very sort of like intimate things around maybe women's bodies. In every space, generally there should be men present, but men should not be, in my view, the voices. The voices should be the women. The men should be there to listen and to learn and to go away and to take that learning and to share that learning with other men, with their sons and their brothers and their uncles and their fathers. And so that to me kind of puts a little bit of a dampener on things when I hear how many men are actually going to be speaking at this conference. If it's a conference on centering women, I would like to hear women's voices because we have a whole heap of amazing women. I mean, we're dripping, oozing with powerful women
Hmm.
all across our island, across the continent, across the diaspora. So you're telling me you can't find a whole set of women to talk about women on international women's event. So there's that. The other question is when we have these events and they are in these very academic spaces or they're in these very politically astute spaces, the UN in New York, you know, who who's really at the table?
The
And
people that get
when
through the Indico registration process and are vetted and have their ID tagged onto them that can fly and afford that one thousand
that
dollars plus. Oh, okay. Should I? Oh,
who
you weren't asking me. Forgive me, audience. Oops.
exactly what African woman from Tanzania or Benin or the Gambia or the average the woman living in a
Costa Rica,
they call them a
Jamaica.
township now
Yeah.
in
Anywhere.
Soweto can
Yeah.
get on an aeroplane and even get a visa to get to America to sit down and talk her truth and be centered and have her voice heard. So we have the usual suspects, those women who have the privilege, perhaps like you and I, who carry a passport of a colonizer, We got our little eagle on our passports, even
Mhm.
though if you have your passport, I mean, because you know, when you have a Caribbean passport, you don't need a visa to go everywhere, and that's another story now about what is going on about these imposition of visas now that
Right.
didn't exist before. They've just been, I mean, Trinidad, we've just had that put on us by England, which is a whole story about the audacity of England to put visa restrictions on us with a Trinidad passport. So if I pull out my Trinidad passport and try and go anywhere, I need a visa. So I have to pull out the other passport with the eagle to be able to move around, or the Babylon Windsor people, those
Mhm.
kind of passport to travel. So again, yes, the lip service, the language, it sounds wonderful. We've got all these things happening in these big, institutions centering women, but how is that going to trickle down? I actually don't even like that trickle down. To me, trickle down is a very derogatory way of putting it. How is it going to engage
Mhm.
and center the voices of the women who really need the protections that they're talking about, who need the opportunities, who need that justice, who need that recognition and that development, if we want to bring it all together?
Yeah.
That's the issue. So, in terms of solutions, we've got to change the whole approach. This is not the way to bring about systemic change. Systemic change has to happen on the ground. The people on the ground who are actually living with the lived reality of these things, they need to be the ones to direct the conversation or the versation or the
I understand.
conversation, because the conversation is the con, isn't it?
Right.
That's where the con, that's where the deception is. So that's where we hear the words, and we see people standing there taking photographs and making pledges, and then they go away and they go back to their homes and their comfortable jobs with their money and their cars and all the other things, and then the sisters on the coal face continue the liberty.
Right.
And so we've got to change our approach. We've got to
Right.
think about who's being centered. Why are they being centered? What's the context? What do they bring to the table? Where these things are happening, what spaces, and who gets entry, as we said? Who can actually get into these spaces?
Okay.
That's so
That's
yes, I do
powerful.
applaud CPAN, and I do applaud the Emancipation Support Committee, because they work hard, but there's a lot of work to be done, and the leadership is still too top heavy with men, and particularly when it comes to women. That's a time when men just need to sit down and just listen.
And I think that that's where some persons are guiding the activities around, for example, what the United Nations Permanent Forum for the People of African Descent is doing. While there are many women that are in the body, many of the experts, presenters that are contributing to that are men. And not to say that there aren't any women, but like you said, we just need to navigate how to put that through, especially during the month that's honoring International Women's Month.
If ever
Right,
it should be happening. I mean,
right, right,
just
and
just give us that.
right. And I think that that's part of it.
God.
Okay, I lost you. Take your time. It's okay. We're gonna make it work. That's why we don't touch things.
I'm so sorry. I'm having such technical problems today.
It's okay. It's
I don't know
okay.
what it is.
But no, but the good news is that it almost looks like it's a creative intentionality because our engineer, Sister Queen, visionary Angela, she has these beautiful circles. It's like we're sitting on a couch. You look like you're by the plant. I mean, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. And we're getting to, we're in our last segment. So it's just a joy and a
We'll
privilege to,
make it work. We'll make it
yeah, we
work. So
make
yeah,
it work. We'll make it work. And I think, no, go ahead, Sister Queen.
I mean, this is the other thing. I always hear this language. I don't know. I'm pretty certain you've got it over there, but here, in Europe and in England, lived experience, lived experience is key. It's like a mantra. And so I say to myself, when I hear situations like this, how is it that when we're talking about women, men are centered so much? What lived experience do men have of being a woman? I don't really think they have any. Just like we don't have lived experience of being men. We overstand and understand some of the challenges we see our brothers, our fathers, our sons, our uncles, faced. facing, and hopefully they see that for us. I mean, we know that there are many that do, but lived experience. We really have to. I really want to see a change whereby we center the voices of those who are affected. I really want this lived experience to be real, to be key. I just, you know, in the philanthropic sector where I've worked, putting on another hat. One of the things that I've always said is that when money is put aside and they determine that there's going to be this program, and somebody jumps up and says, yes, violence against women and girls in Southern Africa, but they've not actually gone on the ground and spoken to those women and girls in that region to ask them, is that really what you want? Perhaps they don't, perhaps the women and the girls don't want that, but perhaps they have their own traditional methods of dealing with these situations, and actually they want to do something entirely different. They want to start businesses, or they want to run music and art projects. You see, what we make assumptions about people. You know, in the old saying, this is about when you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And some people may not want to hear that part, but they need to just keep that in the forefront of their space. So as we get ready to close it, that time goes quickly
It
because
does.
we cover this and that and this and that. And, we're doing, again, because this is Us Speaks, building a new legacy and speaking of things interdisciplinarily and pushing the envelope towards that global space. I just
But
wanted
also,
to,
I'd add that us,
so please do.
us is Aset or Set,
Mm,
known by many names, and
right.
us. Her virtues are wisdom and intuition, unconditional love, and this is what the work that you, my queen, are bringing through this work. This is what we want. We want more wisdom and intuition, which is a very female, or seen as a very female attribute. Unconditional love, the unconditional love we have for our community, for all of our Africans. And if we really embody these principles, if we embody the principles of Mahat, we would actually, if we went back and fetched it Sankofa and brought it forward, we would find ourselves in a far more equitable position when it comes to these things. These things wouldn't be going on the way they're going on at all.
Right.
Not
Right, right. And I think that I offer, please share with our listeners and viewers how they can link with you to be able to, experience some of the work that you do as well, where they can support your poetic publications and presentations, as well as your Saturday broadcasts, where you've got some of the most serious musical DJ selections. I'm like, I be like, selector. I be screaming in my own space. But
I love music. It's like Bob said, when it hits, you feel no pain.
that's right.
We are a musical people. We must remember our core is our spirituality, our music, and for us as people, we need to hold on to those things. We need joy. We need to have joy, and music brings joy. So I do a radio show on a Saturday called Speak Your Truth, and it broadcasts on a community station based in South London called Fertility, which is a Yoruba word. It kind of means like panache, like fertility, boof. And you can catch it online, and it's fertilityradio.com, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
prosperityradio.com. Exactly. And
I
those are,
also do a show which is a much more. It's not the Fertility Radio is specifically for African people. It's my strap line is engaging conversation, eclectic music, and a Pan African perspective. I am the Eclectic Goddess. That's my DJ name and my presenter name, and it's specifically created for our people to tell our truth. And I try to feature Africans across the globe, and it's about who they are. It's not an interview. It's a versation or an
mhm,
iversation, unxation. It's it's a chat. It's a coming together, the
beautiful.
sharing knowledge of self, and yeah, I love to have people come forward and say, "I want to be on your show." I love it when people say that. So please hit me up because I want to hear that. I want to center the voices. I created this for our community. I also do a radio show on a Friday, which is a much more magazine format. It's not for any particular group of people. I present with a couple of like white guys sometimes. I have co-presenters who are African women. We have all sorts of guests. It's a very different format, but I enjoy doing that as well because it's much more based. It's a very localized thing in my area. And I DJ. I did a Afrobeat set last Friday at a place called Ritzy, upstairs at the Ritzy in Brixton, South London. Yeah, I'll be there again
Wonderful.
next month in June doing a reggae set. So I love my music. I live for music. I live for the arts. Uh, I was part. I'm part of a film collective with a group of women. We're a mixed group of women. We held one of our events. We kind of rebirthing, rejuvenating it. It
Oh,
started a good like 12 years ago, and we were just talking earlier. We had a film event this evening. A really excellent film event about regeneration and gentrification, socio-ethnic cleansing in the UK. But we also looked at it within the context of the global space. And we mentioned the one and only wonderful Claudia Jones, who was also born in Belmont in Trinidad and Tobago, like me.
that's right. There we
And I
go.
always use this
Powerful.
quote. Claudia Jones said, "A people's art is the genesis of their freedom."
Please repeat that.
A people's art is the genesis of their freedom.
Mm. A people's art is the genesis of their freedom from the honorable ancestress Claudia Jones. That's powerful. If you don't know who Claudia Jones is, that'll be content for the next podcast because we could talk about her and read some of her pieces, and we would all be edified to another level. I also want to send out another shout out to Sister Queen Shinette, Shinen Saffron for joining us, as well as Trevila Harris. Trevila, if I say your name with a Spanish accent, it's just because it looks like it just rolls off my tongue like that. But so much grace and appreciation and blessings for you taking some time to join us. So as we get ready to close, because it's like at the top of the hour, we're done. It's like, what? It finished already? But I would love for you to share your last word before I just do some of the closings for us. So, what would be your closing word for tonight?
Embrace womanism. We are not feminists, we're womanists. We don't have to follow Massa all the time, you know. We can actually be ourselves, be creative, be innovative, remember who we are, go back, Sankofa, fetch that, and bring forward the greatness that we have, the history that we have, and bring it into the century that we're in, into the times that we're in, so that we can really transform ourselves. We have to
Beautiful.
work on ourselves, put ourselves first. It begins with us.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, illustrious, powerful, revolutionary, most right, honorable African Queen Mother Warrior, Basum. Isis. I'm very grateful to have you with us this evening, and it's a complimentary piece to my closing comment, which is about highlighting one of our other African Queen Mother Warrior sisters, who opened up something, and I want to share this particular quote in terms of what you've just said and what we've been saying through the evening. And I quote: "Holding in your truth doesn't make it disappear; it only makes it heavier to carry. Speak, release, and reclaim your peace." Unquote. And that is none other than African Queen Mother Warrior, Sis Doctor. And you can find out more about her.
Deo.
You can find out more about the I'm Powerment rites of passage for Black African heritage women. And she opened up today on the vernal equinox, right? The opening of spring. Episode 1, entitled A New Day, A New Way, Without Apology. The journey starts here, a space for Black, Brown, and mixed heritage women to reclaim, reconnect, and rise. And you can again get on board because you can go to sisdr.com and get all the information, join an Eventbrite to show that support for these types of works that Speaks Building a New Legacy always promotes. With that being said, remember culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. Be a part of Speaks Building a New Legacy on the first and third Thursday of each month here with the Crew Podcast. a host of divas that bring truth as power through the principles of Ma'at, truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony, unapologetically in full form. Give thanks, dua and tur, and we look forward to having you join us in the very near future. Again, I give
Yeah,
my
I
crown
accept.
dua and tur, dua and tur, dua and tur. And I give thanks for all that are able to appreciate this. If you have other questions, please email me at astspeaks, ASTSPEAKS, astspeaks at gmail.com. You can find Chinzira Kahina on almost any platform of your choice, Facebook, internet.
You're everywhere.
I try. We do our best to
Omnipresent queen.
give thanks and many blessings. And I'm looking forward to our next time. And again, thank you, Virginary engineer like no other, Sister Queen Angela of the Crew Podcast, the formulator, bringing these things together and bringing all of
Dua
us to the
queen, Dua.
give thanks. Dua. Good night.
Blessings.
Blessings.